Hey everyone, welcome to a Locked On live show here. I am excited. We're having a lot of fun watching the lottery. We were all chatting before we got started here, and we are just trying to give you our instant reaction to everything as I get everything up and running on my end here. Sorry, as I'm a little delayed with everything, but we've got me, Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans Wednesday, co-host of Locked On NBA. I'm joined by John Corrales, host of Locked On Celtics. John, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
There we go. We've got Renee Washington, host of Locked On Wizards. Hi, Renee. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Jake?
I'm doing well. And then we've got maybe the man of the hour on the show right now, Doug Branson, host of Locked On Hornets. I was shooting him messages in our little G chat, just screaming Doug at him when the Hornets up with their normal. Doug, how are you?
The draft lottery gods have finally smiled upon Charlotte. The first time since your city of New Orleans ripped our team away. This is amazing.
I still try and apologize for this daily, right? No, so that's exciting for you, though. This is kind of what that team needed a little bit, huh?
Oh, they needed some kind of burst of energy for a fan base that I think was I don't know. I wouldn't say they were checked out, but I think they were certainly waiting on something. And if there's one thing this team needs, it's star power. And it's so difficult to find that at 8. It might still be difficult to find that in this draft at 3. But I did the math. 3 better than 8 right now. So got to be happy about something.
I think that checks out here. We were all joking before the show. We'll get into a lot of insight on this, just kind of winners, losers, that sort of stuff too with it. Obviously, there's some. Is there any bigger loser, does anyone think, than the New York Knicks right now in all of this?
I mean, in general, that's true.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
We didn't need the draft lottery to tell us that.
I mean, after last year and like the hype around them and Zion going to New York, which didn't happen, as I can prove here. It's just rough for them, I think, in this sort of thing. You know, as you kind of alluded to, Doug, it's not exactly the best draft, though. Maybe you could argue it's a little bit deep, but the 8th overall pick, right?
I mean, it would have been difficult, I think, especially in a draft that wasn't that deep, to find talent down at 8. So yeah, I mean, I think anyone that got into that top 4, including Chicago, who jumped up as well, I think are counting their blessings.
Yeah, I think it just speaks to what always happens in New York. You know, it's like when it comes draft season, New York fans get excited. They think this is their year. It's going to work out. As last year, they went from thinking they were going to get Zion Williamson, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, to getting none of them. So they have become kind of a joke in that sense in terms of draft expectations. But here we are again as they're at that number 8 spot. As you mentioned, this draft is not going to be as deep, especially not having had a March Madness and NCAA tournament and postseason to watch players that really step up in that moment, like we saw someone like John Morant doing last year. So, Knicks fans, sorry.
Yeah, Alex Wolf of Locked On Knicks reminded all of us in the Locked On NBA Twitter DM that the Knicks have not moved up in the lottery since the very first NBA lottery. So that's bad.
That was a mind-blowing stat to me. I hadn't realized that, which just kind of like sums everything up for how, you know, the past 2 decades at least have gone for them with everything. So to run down for anyone that didn't watch, by the way, the Timberwolves move up 2 spots, grab the number 1 overall pick. The Golden State Warriors end up at number 2. We'll talk about that coming up here in just a minute. Charlotte, as we mentioned, number 3. Bulls 4, 5. Hawks 6. Pistons, Knicks, Wizards, Suns, Spurs, then the Pelicans, and then actually, there we go. Then we jump to the Boston Celtics, who have the Memphis picks they didn't get in there. Renee, for your team, the Wizards here in kind of the middle of the first round, what are your thoughts on the draft overall for it? And is there anyone you like maybe around that kind of mid-lottery spot so far?
You know, according to GM Tommy Shepard, there are about 15 players in this draft this year that the Wizards feel they can have come in and make an impact, whether it's an immediate impact or a later on impact. So I think that may have been a little bit overly optimistic in that sense. I'm not really sure that there are 15 players that I'm fully sold on as of now. I think the hardest thing with the draft is we always see players that tend to drop, that maybe catch us by surprise, and a team ends up picking up a sleeper in that sense. So for the Wizards being at that number 9 spot, I think the biggest thing, as they're talking about looking for a shooter, looking for someone that brings more versatility and depth to this team that's trying to get over a hump, and having John Wall, Bradley Beal come back, the group that we saw in the NBA restart. I don't know the exact name, but as Shepard mentioned, they're super optimistic in the Wizards front office that any of these first 15 that they get will be able to help them in some way. So he was coming into this kind of feeling like, wherever we fit, we'll be fine and we'll make it work. I don't know which player that is, but just hoping that it's someone that can come right in and not disappoint.
Yeah, it's like kind of a deep draft, but not. John, you're kind of in a similar boat with the Celtics getting the Memphis lottery pick since they didn't jump up at all. How are you feeling about this draft and the Celtics? There we go, sitting at that spot.
Yeah, I think the Boston Celtics getting this pick via the Jeff Green trade from a few years ago. I don't know what they do with this pick. I mean, I think honestly, they've got now 3 first-round picks in this draft, and I don't know that they really want to keep all of them or any of them, for that matter. They have a team that's kind of building towards a win now. If anything, they're going to look to maybe get the best shooter available, because if they're going to get anybody worth anything at 14, any sort of immediate contributor, it's going to be shooting off the bench. So whatever lockdown shooter falls with any sort of flaws that Danny Ainge and Brad Stevens feel like they can work through, I think that's going to be what the Celtics target.
Yeah, and I think there's a number of those guys kind of in the mid to late lottery that we can get. Paul Terrebonne, who's joining us on YouTube here, by the way, says the West keeps getting stronger. I personally was hoping that you wouldn't see the Suns or the Kings jump up in the lottery here. The Warriors, we'll get to that. I want to spend some time on that with everyone here and get their thoughts on them getting that number 1 overall pick. But the Timberwolves, who are a team with playoff aspirations and wanted to have been in it this year and kind of swung to some degree for the fences and bringing over D'Angelo Russell, them getting the number 1 overall pick just makes the West tough. I think we all kind of fell in love with the Suns to a degree in the bubble. The Spurs just showed they weren't going to go away. The Pelicans are going to be in this. The Kings are going to be in this. And now Minnesota adds another piece that they can either keep or trade depending on where Gerson Rosas thinks they are. It's not fun. I realize I'm the only Western Conference person here in this all of a sudden. And yeah, I'm not thrilled to be in here. So are you all feeling good about being in the East at least right now?
No,
I would feel good if the Hornets could acquire some talent. I think East West, you got to have talent to win in the NBA and to win in the playoffs. So they've got to make something happen there with that top 3 pick. And I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility if the organization, if Mitch Kupchak, if Michael Jordan, if they fell in love with somebody to try to bump up a spot. I mean, they've got plenty of young talent that they could deal with. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they jump to the 2 or 1 spot if they could make a deal happen. But there's a lot of talent there as well. We lost John again. That's okay. He'll be back.
It's nice to be live and have
that's right. We're going to talk to Ben Beacon of Locked On Wolves here in a few minutes. He is now the owner of the number 1 pick as well.
Yeah,
and
I think for the Wizards. Go ahead.
Oh, just quickly, for whoever's watching, by the way, if you want to ask your questions, put them in the chat. We'll see them here. We'll try and get to them. As kind of a question I want to pose to our audience right now, I don't see there being a number 1 guy in this draft, so I'm curious who everyone kind of has number 1 on their big board. So I'd love to see the chat. Let us know if we can maybe get a consensus and also help me with my draft evaluation there. But Renee, you were saying about the Wizards.
Yeah, I think that the toughest thing, exactly as Doug was saying, for any team, regardless if you're on the East or West, is we see the depth that is needed in the league, especially now as we're watching the NBA playoffs play out. And just knowing that you have to not only have 2 all-stars on your team, but also have shooters, versatility, guys that can run the floor, a variety of just players that can step on the floor and find ways to score. And for a team like the Wizards that I cover, that's something that they're specifically targeting and working around, not only on the defensive side, but offensively having to be better to ensure that, let's bring back Bradley Beal and John Wall healthy, who are, as of now, supposedly ready to a 100% go by October. But at the end of the day, you need to have depth and versatility beyond just having those all-stars. So for a team that's on the outside of the playoffs, John, unlike your group that's in the playoffs, for a team that's on the outside of the playoffs looking in, it's about not only bringing in a ringer, but also just bringing in more depth so you can be 10 guys, that you can run in. And unless you're the Rockets who can play 8 consistently, having 10 players that you can really rely on that are strong, that can bring something to the floor.
Here's a problem, I think, with a draft like this, where there's no consensus. And when you get past, the top 5, that number 6 through number 16 can all be kind of equal talent, you're not getting equal pay scale. Mm-hmm. And so if you reach for somebody at 6, if you're Atlanta and you reach for somebody, you're paying them that 6-slot salary. Now, Atlanta doesn't have to worry about it, but teams that may be worrying about costs, and we just heard today that the league doesn't know what the salary cap is going to be next year. We don't know what the collective bargaining is, how the collective bargaining agreement is going to change. But you run the risk of taking a guy at 6, 7, 8 that could have been taken at 16, 17, 18, and the pay disparity is a lot. And if that money that you could have saved could have helped you maybe get somebody else, help you get, use one of your exceptions to bring in another role player. So it's a draft like this puts pressure on front offices to really get it right.
That's one. I think rookie scale deals are some of the most important things you can have on a team in general. It's almost double so for the reasons you mentioned. One, because we don't know what the salary cap is going to look like, and almost assuredly to some degree it's going to be low this year and potentially years in the future. And that means that if you nail this draft pick wherever it is, and that guy outperforms, and those good rookies always outperform, you're looking pretty good there all of a sudden. But that's tough to do with the way they're going to be doing the scouting combine, the lack of pre-draft preparation that goes into some of this, that it might be hard. And I wonder if because of that, there might be some good players here who end up in wrong situations for him potentially, which kind of is going to have ripple effects throughout the league. Looking quickly at the chat here, LSU31 always, who's a Locked On Pels listener, says Killian Hayes is his number 1 overall. We've got Anthony Edwards from Paul Terrebonne. His athleticism, he says, is hard to pass up in this draft, and it thinks he gives him the higher upside. I don't disagree with any of those things. And then Joshua Cook said there should be a rule that if you have made the finals, you're not eligible for the draft lottery the final year. This sounds like someone who's a Western Conference fan who's a little bit bitter that the Warriors are up there. I don't disagree with that, though, right now, given the situation. And I know coming up here, when we're talking about the number 1 overall pick, we've got Ben Beekan, host of Locked On Timberwolves, who's going to be joining us in a minute. I'm going to be curious to hear what he has to say, ending the number 1 overall pick and the direction that team is going to go here. I'm going to pose a question to you all that's around the Warriors, and we knew this was coming. We just kind of made a joke about it here. I'm firmly of the belief that they've got to trade this pick with the way the roster is built in terms of win now. Do you all agree? Do you all think they should keep it? Yes. John, I saw you nodding your head. Yes, they should
100%,
trade it.
100% trade it. See if you can get it to a team with a better situation that's younger, and see if you can get a role player that you think can help you out. I don't know. I didn't really look at all of the trade machinations, and obviously it depends on the salary cap. But I'm kind of curious about, would Phoenix take that pick for some deal involving Kelly Oubre? Would Atlanta take that pick for some deal involving Dwayne Dedmon? Those are 2 guys that I think could be solid players that could really benefit a team like the Warriors that aren't making huge money. Maybe they could find a way to make that deal. But yes, trade that pick if you can to a team that's younger. And part of the reason why I looked at Phoenix and Atlanta is they're younger and it fits their timeline more. And these players fit Golden State's timeline more. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I think would really work out for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think the biggest thing is Golden State is a unique team to have in this lottery draft as a whole, as we know, having won 3 championships in recent years, for the fact that they're not in rebuild mode. They're not scrambling. They had injuries that put them in this situation. So it's not a matter of having to bring in as we talk about, a ringer and trying to get it right in the draft. They just have to bring in someone that's already established. They're not really looking for someone right now that's going to need to take a year or 2 to develop and adjust to the league league and coming straight out of college. They're looking for someone that's got some experience under his belt already that can come right into this team and help them be a top team in the West again. So I think it makes way more sense to trade this pick and be able to use it to now bring in someone that's a veteran, that has experience. You have Steph, Clay hopefully coming back healthy, Draymond Green already as your big three. You bring in a fourth piece that can complement them. Andrew Wiggins also being there, a fourth piece that can complement those big three. And now you are a team that's back in contention for the Western Conference. So yeah, their focus is different. They're not like the rest of us on here with our teams that are looking for someone that'll help them rebuild. They're looking to get back.
I know.
Let me throw something out there. Let me throw something out there. What about a deal, some kind of 3-team deal with Charlotte? You mentioned Charlotte wanting to move up, where Charlotte gives up the third pick. Yeah, what? If Charlotte gives up the third pick and Golden State gives up the second pick, so Charlotte gives up a player to Golden State, another team gives up a player to Golden State. Golden State, fills out their bench. 2 teams move up that might want to move up. I mean, there's a path for Golden State to add some role players here, fill out their bench to support their stars.
Yeah, I'll just add real quickly before we get to Ben Beacon that the window for Golden State is wide open, and there really isn't a player available to them in this draft that I think is going to be ready to go right away, and neither does Wes Goldberg of Locked On Warriors. I was listening to his podcast this week. He's not sold on especially on James Wiseman, who I think a lot of people think is a natural fit because the Warriors are in need of a big, and he is just not sold that James Wiseman is the kind of player that can come in and just immediately contribute. And so if that's the case, yeah, if they can find some value there with the pick, absolutely trade it.
Yeah, so we're bringing Ben on, I think, right now, it sounds like. I see the chat. We'll get to those here in a moment. Don't worry. We are going to answer those questions. But first, we got Ben Beacon here with us talking the draft, host of the Locked On Timberwolves podcast. You should definitely be subscribing to that and listening tomorrow because I think you've got some quick coverage coming about this. First and foremost, thanks for joining, and you've got to be feeling pretty good right now.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess technically the Timberwolves didn't move up this year since they had the same odds as Cleveland and Golden State, but Timberwolves had never moved up in the lottery in the history of the franchise. So the Karl-Anthony Towns year, when they did have the worst record, was the only year that the Wolves actually picked number one and were supposed to pick number one. So this feels good. It was definitely unexpected. I think I speak for all Timberwolves fans when I say that. The Wolves are not used to having good lottery luck.
What was your initial reaction, I guess, when you saw that it was Golden State at 2, meaning that your team that you cover is going to be number 1?
Well, maybe this is it. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but my initial reaction was, of course, of all the years Timberwolves are going to have the number 1 pick, there isn't a consensus number 1 guy, and there's not somebody consensus number 1 that I think, that I love for the Wolves. But at the same time, I mean, if it's you're theoretically going to get the best player in the draft, hopefully, or use it as a great trade chip, which I know there isn't a lot of history to trading the number 1 overall pick, but I think the Timberwolves are probably going to try to do that.
So Paul Terrebonne, who's in the chat here, says, has a question for you. What's the mindset of the Minnesota organization? So you mentioned, are they kind of in win now mode trying to get to the playoffs, or are they going to likely draft someone here? Or are they looking to move the pick?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds weird to say the team with the third worst record in the league this year is in win now mode, but yeah, I mean, you have 2 24-year-old guys who were both all-stars a year ago, not this year, but a year ago, and they've got two-thirds of what they would consider to be a big three. So I mean, they're looking for a third star, and if they think they can get one with the number 1 pick, they'll take one. Whatever their board looks like, or if they can find a trade for a third star, then they're going to do that. So it's weird, but yeah, I mean, and again, I understand how odd this sounds, but it's similar to Golden State. Different, obviously, but similar in that Golden State has Steph Curry, they have Draymond Green, they have Klay Thompson, they have these guys, and they don't need a number 1 overall type, prospect on their roster. The Timberwolves probably feel similarly in that they've got 2 all-stars that are, at the 1 and at the 5 that are both 24 years old, and so they're in a similar spot. It's not quite the same as Cleveland or Detroit or some of these other teams that had a shot at the number 1 pick.
Hey, Ben, do you think the impending sale of the team has any impact on what Minnesota does here? I
really don't know. I would think that I would think it would maybe make the Timberwolves more attractive. I mean, they obviously have plenty of people that are trying to buy the team. They have plenty of people interested. It's an NBA team; those don't go for sale, every day. But I would think that it only increases the value, right? I mean, it's very marketable. Obviously, when the draft comes around, if it sounds like they're trying to close the deal. Everything we're hearing is Glenn Taylor's motivated to sell the team. That can happen in the next 2 months. The team's going to get a lot more, airtime, a lot more national airtime around the draft. Whoever the number one pick is going to be, if it's LaMelo Ball, obviously the biggest name that everybody knows nationally. But whoever the number one pick is, look at all the publicity that Karl Anthony Towns brought to the Timberwolves, which is obviously an organization not used to having a whole lot of national attention.
I'm curious to know, do you have a player that sticks out that you think would be a best fit for Minnesota moving forward to be that third piece?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, the obvious best fit at number one is Anthony Edwards. I mean, if you talk about the three guys that are likely to go number one, who you would have said before tonight's lottery, I mean, Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, James Wiseman. Timberwolves have a point guard. They have a center. They're both really good. So, I mean, Anthony Edwards makes sense that they would want to take a wing that's going to fit. I've talked about this at length on the show over the last few weeks, really. I feel like we've been already talking about this draft forever, but Anthony Edwards is a lot like Andrew Wiggins in terms of some of the question marks to his game, whether it be defensive effort or, the mechanics look good on his shot, but he's not consistent, making three-pointers, being efficient. Exact same question marks Andrew Wiggins had. And Timberwolves fans have scar tissue from Andrew Wiggins and all the things that were supposed to happen. And so maybe that's unfair. And I hate to, draw that, I guess, direct comparison is maybe unfair to Edwards, but that's a scary fit for me. I like, of the three, I think LaMelo Ball is the best prospect in the draft. There's a lot of Timberwolves fans that think that he's a fit, that you could play him and D'Angelo Russell together. I think Jonathan Giovanni at ESPN has him mocked to the Timberwolves and has for a while. I don't love that fit, but if the Timberwolves end up making the pick, I probably would take him just because he's the best player available. And even though the Wolves are trying to be in win now mode to make the playoffs, you can't, if you truly believe he's the best prospect in the draft, you have to take him unless you can find a trade that's going to make any sense.
How would you feel about LeVar Ball up there in Minnesota?
How would LeVar Ball feel about being in Minnesota in January? I think
that's the question.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, he's been pretty quiet the last couple of years. I think there's so many different layers to that too, because, is there a whole, who knows? And obviously the Knicks aren't in the top three, so the Knicks aren't a realistic destination for him. But, would that work in Minnesota? Would the Ball family play nice with being in Minnesota? Who knows?
It's just different factors that go into it. So thanks for joining us. What do you have coming on the Locked On Timberwolves podcast?
Yeah, well, obviously breaking down the lottery, talking, kind of revisiting. I did a big board over the last few weeks and going to kind of redo that, I guess. And now it basically just becomes who I think the best player in the draft is. It's actually a little less exciting to have the number one pick in that sense, because now there's only one. I'm not talking about all the different things that could happen before the Timberwolves. But also, I want to talk a little bit about trading the pick potentially and moving backwards. I think there's a lot of teams that are going to try and do that in this draft. And so I'm going to look to have some good guests on to talk through that. And, possibly some of the teams that could be interested in trading up and have some of those discussions on are there existing players, are there star caliber players or guys with upside who the Wolves could try and trade for. And all it takes is one team that falls in love with a prospect that needs that number one pick to pull off a trade. So as infrequently as that happens, I think the Wolves are going to try and do that.
We've also got Vince Massara in the chat who says Ball has been great here in Australia. So that's kind of, I guess, he's been quiet here in New Orleans too. So if that's ever a concern, maybe it's being alleviated a little bit. So everyone, make sure you check out Locked On Timberwolves. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a lot to cover there. Do you have like a hypothetical trade back deal in mind that you'd like? I'm putting you on the spot there, I know.
No, you're good. I have to look at the order and see exactly how it went down again. But some of the names, I have a wish list of guys that I feel like the Wolves could go after. The hot name recently with the Sixers' problems in the bubble has been Ben Simmons. There's some of the similar questions with Simmons and D'Angelo Russell and what that fit would look like. Devin Booker, obviously, but perhaps with the Suns being as good as they were in the bubble, that's even less likely now. One of the names I've talked about recently, John Collins with Atlanta. I don't know if they're trying to move him or not, but do they want to trade up and get an Anthony Edwards to fit with Trae Young and their young core? So there's a few names out there. Bradley Beal, who knows? The Wizards have always said they won't trade him, but number 1 overall pick.
Like Renee.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
It's actually something that they've been talking a lot about because that discussion keeps getting brought up around Bradley Beal's future. And according to Brooks and, of course, Tommy Shepard being one that's more involved in the decision-making, to say the least, seems as though the plan is to bring back Beal and Wall and move forward with them because at the end of the day, looking at the Wizards, they haven't had a full season with everybody healthy. John Wall's health has been, over the last couple of years, it's been injury after injury. So I think part of what the Wizards are looking forward to now is what does this team look like at as close to full strength as possible? And if it still isn't, they're still not able to reach those goals of at least being a playoff contention team, maybe then we go back to the drawing board. But with Beal and Wall being so young, they're hungry to get back. Again, they're supposed to be 100% in October, and keep knocking on wood to make that happen. But so that whenever the season does start for next year, of course, that may not be December, they'll be ready to go. So I don't think you're getting Beal, but maybe someone else.
And that's kind of been the what we've heard the last couple of years. His name keeps coming up, and the Wizards shoot that down pretty quickly. But I mean, that's kind of the quick 4 guys that come to mind. Obviously, there's different tiers there, but there's trades to be had out there, and we don't know yet if this offseason there's going to be less or more of that with how weird it is. So we'll see.
Look, it's a good time to at least have the number 1 overall pick, no matter what. So, Ben, thanks for taking the time with us here.
Absolutely, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Welcome me back. Doug here with us. We've got Frisbee Champion Puppy. That's quite the name. Says he thinks Beal could be a trade target, but would rather get Booker. I think every team would love either Beal or Booker. I don't know if either of those are unfortunately going to be realistic here, though.
I'm sorry, Washington. I'm sorry, Renee.
You're calling me by my last name. It's like, dang.
We should just do that. Just refer to Washington as both
just
you
Washington.
and the city and the team, all of it. Look, let's be real. The Wizards, if you're sitting here saying, like, geez, I wonder what they look like when they're fully healthy. They look this bad right now. It's not like they had Bradley Beal. That's not like John Wall is going to come in here and turn a team that was a lottery team into a team that's going to get home court advantage in the playoffs. I think you got to be realistic in Washington. And if the right move comes along, if the right deal comes along, if Minnesota's looking to make a deal and they are desperate, let's see. I think if you're Washington, if you're Tommy Shepard, you got to go in there and say, all right, wow me. Tell me if you want Bradley Beal, if you think putting him with D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns is going to make you a contender or however good it's going to make you in the West. Take that deal or at least explore that deal and see if you can go something like what the Celtics got from Brooklyn. Maybe not that kind of haul, but like if another team is willing to sell, if another team's sitting there saying, we don't know, and they've got players that you might want. Now, the other side of it is, what players might you want? I mean,
bingo.
That's obviously the other side of the coin here. But if you can get something good and get that number 1 overall pick, and you feel good about who you can get with that number 1 overall pick, then I say you have to explore it from Washington's perspective. It's time to move on from Bradley Beal, make him available, and see what you can get.
Yes and no. So I definitely like the idea of exploring options. We're not all the Celtics here. We can't all sit and have these conversations around like the Celtics do when they move in and move Kyrie, bring in Kemba.
Really, you should have kicked him out of here.
I know. You shouldn't even be here. Your team's playing in the playoffs. I at least could see the game behind you. But I will say that for the Wizards, the biggest question is, who do you bring in that's going to be able to be as established as Bradley Beal? You're really taking a risk there. He's, prior to the NBA pause, was one of the leading scorers across the league, averaging over 30 points a game. So now that there's no definite player that you can bring in that's going to be able to come right in and make that impact. So short term, I don't know if there's a player, especially if you're looking at the draft, looking at Anthony Edwards, James Wiseman, LaMelo Ball, who can you package a deal with that makes the most sense to move Bradley Beal? And I think it actually would add more issues in that sense because the team, as we saw in the restart, they need a veteran all-star leader. They need an elite player. And Bradley Beal and John Wall are those two players. So to move one of those pieces, you'd be back at square one. And it's kind of like we're going to end up having the exact same season next year as this past year. So in my opinion, having these two back healthy, John Wall claims, and this is what he's saying, it's the healthiest he's ever felt. He has been pain-free for the first time since joining the NBA in 2010. Bradley Beal's apparently feeling great. They are working to get them back and better than what they were before. Now, I agree there's a risk in that as well because especially injury-plagued John Wall, he's 30 years old and he hasn't been able to complete a full season in a couple of years now. But overall, I just think, is the risk worth it? Is it worth moving Bradley Beal in hopes that someone else might pan out to be as good as him or to stick with a player that's already averaging 30 points a game on top of the young players like Rui Hachimura that we saw do not great. They didn't win in the NBA restart, but they fared well. They got a great experience, and this team coming together with some young, fresh legs and whoever they can draft, you never know. But the benefit, and this is the biggest part you missed, John, is the Wizards are in the East. If they're in the West, this is a whole different conversation. But in the East, looking at the Bucks as the Raptors, the Celtics, the Sixers, there's potential there to move up in the ranks a lot easier, I should say, and of course the West, which has 13, 14 teams competing for the top 8 spots.
I'll be honest with you, I'm looking through the salaries in the rosters here. Minnesota trading out of that number 1 pick to Washington. I don't see any deal straight up. It would have to be a multi-team deal. So, but the point stands theoretically.
You can explore.
In full honesty, there's nobody like I don't know who the Minnesota Timberwolves give up to match salary that makes this at all worth it.
It also is going to require, as you mentioned, the Wizards kind of really falling in love with one of those guys at the top to kind of move up and do all of the draft that doesn't have Zion, doesn't have that kind of clear number 1 guy. I think that makes it a little bit more difficult unless they just do happen to fall in love with the guy. But given the limitations on some of the scouting interviews and things like that you're going to be able to do, I wonder if that plays a factor. Ryan Levetter, I hope I pronounced that last name right, says it's going to go Ball, Edwards, Wiseman. Those are his top 3. I'd probably put it somewhere close to that. What's the order when it comes to Ball, Edwards, and Wiseman for everybody, since those seem to be at least the clear like tier 1 guys in this draft?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I think that Anthony Edwards is definitely going to be on the radar of Minnesota. And then for Golden State, if they keep the pick, then I think I'll disagree with Wes. I guess I'm agreeing with Wes in that he might not contribute right away, but he does fill a future need for them at the center position. And then I think that slides LaMelo Ball back to 3, which I think would be perfect for Charlotte, by the way, because I think you have to separate the Ball children from the Ball family, because as you've seen, Jake, you haven't had much interference from LeVar Ball, and Lonzo Ball has been very much like, I'm not my father. And so I think the same would apply to LaMelo. So I don't foresee any problems there, getting into Charlotte and contributing there. And they're looking for star power. And I think LaMelo and James Wiseman are the 2 players. I think Anthony Edwards is going to have a fantastic NBA career.
I think. Oh, there he goes. Doug dropped out.
Sorry.
Renee, of those 3, who do you have?
Well, I think for me, I tend to agree a little bit with what Doug is saying. I think that it's Anthony Edwards. I think his shooting ability is something that, as a lot of teams keep hitting on, it's hard to pass up a score, and for him to have at his size, his range, and what he can bring offensively. I do also think that James Wiseman. Here we are.
All right, we lost Renee for a second.
I do think that
John,
James Wiseman.
there we go.
Sorry, I guess I don't know. My internet's always wonky. James Wiseman as a center. If Golden State's looking to bring in a big man, I think he's the perfect number 2 for them. If they keep that pick, of course, and do not trade it. But I do think
it's hypothetical.
All hypotheticals. We love to speculate, and I think that LaMelo Ball does make sense as a number 3. I don't know talent wise. Just it's hard. He's had a much better career in Australia than in Lithuania, of course. We saw his progress, but as a point guard and we just don't know enough on him yet. So I feel more confident if I'm making a decision in Anthony Edwards definitely being that number one player.
Yeah, it's so much of it depends on what your definition of what you're looking for in that number one pick. I mean, LaMelo Ball, I think when you talk about the ceilings, the ultimate everything goes best ceiling, I think LaMelo Ball is very tantalizing in that regard. And I think that time in Australia helped because, instead of playing, forget the Lithuania thing for a minute, and forget college, you're playing down there against men, big, tough. The competition is rough in Australia, and they're not going to take it easy on him. That's a year of professional experience that he has that can only help in getting him ready for the NBA. They don't care about the fact that he's LaMelo Ball. They don't care about his whatever, star power or anything like that. So I think the combination of those things, his size, his vision, give him like the highest upside. I like, from what I've seen, and I'm certainly no expert, but I think Anthony Edwards probably is the most likely to come in and make an immediate impact. So I'm going to go with LaMelo Ball as the highest upside guy, and then Anthony Edwards and Wiseman as kind of like even below him, and just pick what you prefer for your team.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. For Ball's credit, his father has been a little quiet, had a few issues in the beginning of everything during Lonzo's tenure here in New Orleans. But in general, it seems that all of his children are kind of distancing themselves from him to a degree, kind of wanting to step out of his shadow and almost be their own man, which I think shows a sign of maturity in all of them as well. So I think that's a great thing to see. We had a comment on screen a moment ago. Vince Massara mentioned that it requires wanting LaMelo a lot more than the others. Do you see the Knicks potentially just being like, we've got to make a splash, we've got to move up, and kind of getting a little bit desperate with like a bit of a new regime under there? So do you see them as potentially a candidate for either trading up or trying to make a splash in like that regard?
I mean,
is there anyone in the market for 17 power forwards? If so, then I think the Knicks have a shot.
I'm not saying they have the assets to do it or that they could pull it off, but like, are they feeling a little bit desperate in New York and like needing to do something? Also, like their last offseason was the weirdest.
But do you want to put a member of the Ball family in New York City? Is that the right place to be with all of the surrounding things? You talked about their dad being kind of quiet for a while. The call of the spotlight might be a little too much, and all of a sudden being in New York, I don't know. But knowing the Knicks, yeah, I'm sure they're gonna explore that, and I'm sure the Knicks are going to be one of the teams that's looking to go to Golden State and say, hey, we'll go to number 2. Always expect the Knicks to do something stupid.
But let's just say this real quick, that there's a reason why LaMelo Ball isn't a consensus number 1, because he has flaws in his game. I mean, he's a liability in terms of outside shooting. It's that you're buying into that ability to shoot to increase and his insane vision and creativity on the court to make him into a superstar.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I think that something that I've noticed from LeVar Ball, it just seems to me like he almost had that typical first child syndrome. Like, I'm not a parent, so I can't speak on it personally, but first child, you're like very overbearing and overprotective. And then with each son, he's gotten a little bit better. And it seems like with LaMelo, he's a little bit more hands off and not as involved and has seemed to kind of let him go. And I think LaMelo's upside is just so huge. And that's something that we talked about. But watching his growth, I was even watching an interview with him earlier. Watching his growth from Lithuania to Australia is something that's very encouraging to me. You look at, he was averaging like 6 points and barely playing in Lithuania to then being rookie of the year in Australia and really jumping up in terms of his talent. You saw the physical and even the mental growth that he had. So if he's able to make that in such a short amount of time, obviously all these guys are still so young, but I think actually having Lonzo brother and LeVar, who is hands-on as a father, will actually help in that sense for him to be able to continue to progress in maybe even a faster way. So for the Knicks, you have RJ Barrett, you've got Frank Ntilikina, you've got Julius Randle and Dennis Smith Jr. It's a group that they need to get something going. And I think at this point it's trying to build that foundation, and he might be a good part of that, just to kind of stir the pot a little bit and bring in someone that's got the right mentality and is hungry. So why not take a chance on him? I mean, who else? If you don't take him, who's the other player you pick?
Right. Well, I mean, that's a fair point. I think there's one thing that we're not considering when we're talking about teams moving up, and it's teams with cap space in 2021 that are looking to keep that cap space open. How much cap space, again, going back to the collective bargaining agreement point, to the point of the restart, if you're looking to keep that cap space open, trading up and occupying some of it, if the salary cap is going to drop, if you're not sure what it's going to be a year or two from now, trading up and occupying number 1, number 2, number 3 salary slot guy in that on your roster, how much is that going to impact your pursuit of one of the premier free agents? So you don't want to screw up and have a guy that, I mean, look, it could work out and you have a good player, but for a draft like this where there's no sure thing, do you really want to move up and say, well, let's take a crack at this guy and pay him whatever that top 3 salary slot is, and then in 2 years, or the summer of 21, where you're trying to pursue a free agent, you say, this salary cap number came in lower than we expected, and now we have to make a move to move somebody that we didn't want to move to try and open up cap space. I think there's so many cap machinations that are going on here that maybe some of the teams that may be willing to trade up might give them some pause.
I mean, if you're moving up, you're likely going to have to take back potentially a bad contract in that, and that can kind of impact that. And these are the things that all of the NBA front offices are going to really have to evaluate. And if you're not sold on one of those guys, and as Vince has been saying here in the chat, all of the potential top picks have flaws. There's a reason why there's no clear number 1 overall guy, and this can lead to some issues. So I want to wrap up with one final question for you. We've been talking about the top of the lottery, but there is the whole draft here. I'm going to put you all on the spot. If you don't have an answer, that's okay too. I don't see it in the chat anymore. Doug, if you can grab it. There's a question about picking guys outside of the top 14, outside of the lottery, and usually you kind of find a diamond in the rough there. There it goes. 2020 Vision Entertainment, I'm assuming. We have a feeling that this will be a draft where a pick outside the top 14, and there might be a star similar to 2014 with Giannis. Is there anyone outside of maybe the projected lottery guys that you've seen that you really like and think has a bright future in the NBA? Sleeper picks, I guess, so to speak here. If you don't have one, that's okay too. I haven't done a ton of draft scouting just yet.
Yeah, I can't. We can't even come up with who's the number 1 pick. I'm certainly not going to figure out.
Oh, I've got a couple, maybe. I got a couple.
25 that's going to become the next Giannis.
I got a couple. I love the NBA draft. I love giving out my little bachelor roses to my draft crushes. Right now, I'm giving a rose to Devin Vassell. You can move on to the next round. Small forward out of Florida State, long arms. He can score. He can play defense. Give me that. Obi Toppin was like a hot name for a while. He was like in the top 4 for a little while. He's fallen all the way back to 10 in Tankathon's latest rankings. But I could see Obi Toppin sneaking back up into the top 5, 20-point scorer, can fly high, power forward out of Dayton. Love him. Tyrese Halliburton, another name. I mean, I could go on, but I won't.
So my 2, I've actually had the chance to see Obi Toppin play in person when I was working a game, and watching him play in person, his size, his build, his mobility, he gives me some Jason Tatum vibes. And I think that his upside is very big in the NBA. I think playing at a higher level, especially at this level in terms of the NBA, is going to only help him grow more. You see some players that tend to go under the radar, being at an A10 school, which, by the way, proud to say he's representing A10 schools like myself. I do think that he's going to be someone that's going to excel and really surprise people. But actually someone else is Miles Powell, who went to Seton Hall. And he had a number of injuries late in his college career, including a concussion that he had to sit out for, and was going to declare before, but then decided he wanted to finish out his college career, try to help his team get a championship. Of course, coronavirus hit, and nobody had the chance to fight for a championship thanks to COVID-19. But I think he's someone I've watched actually from a young age in high school, since he's from the same area as me, and not to be a homer. But I do think that the way that he plays, the way he attacks the basket, his athleticism, and he's already working out with a number of players, and I see the growth just from that. So being at the NBA level, I think he's going to be someone that has the strength, versatility, and really just the overall confidence to step into the next level and have his game translate accordingly. So those are my two that I'm watching.
I got about 17 more, but I'll give you one. How about Cole Anthony out of my alma mater, UNC? He keeps falling. He's going to make somebody very happy in the 14 to 25 range. Cole Anthony, I'm telling you, didn't get a fair shake in college, and he's not going to get a fair shake in this draft. That's okay. He's going to be a huge sleeper pick, I think, for someone in this draft.
I'm going to go international here as John is looking up a prospect name to kind of pick and just say, and then try and like hang his hat on. I totally see it working in his mind right there. Don't go. Okay, no. You'll like this one, John. I'm going to go with Alexei Puksevsky out of Greece, from Serbia. 7-footer, 7'3" wingspan who can shoot the three ball pretty well. That's popular in the NBA here, kind of late lottery, I think. Potentially out of there. So that's who I'm maybe is going to be hoping is going to be available for the Pelicans.
I wanted to ask you guys about the guys who went to the G League Professional Path program, and if any of those guys seem interesting to you, or what you guys thought about that, the whole decision making for some of the guys to go that way.
I think so. I haven't looked at those guys enough. I think the whole idea of them doing it is so interesting to keep some of these guys like LaMelo Ball, RJ Hampton, and the like here in the United States, and just in general. You and I have talked about this Locked On NBA, John. Unbelievably smart move by the NBA on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's an incredible move by the NBA, and I think it's going to have impacts on the draft for years to come. I mean, I think. The pandemic is going to make us rethink a lot of things. And I think one of those things might be the efficacy of college sports. And so the NBA, not knowing that this was coming, has set themselves up perfectly for that instance.
Yeah, I think we can have a whole other hour-long show just specifically talking around the different pathways to the NBA. But I do think one of the biggest benefits is it makes these conversations a lot easier because it allows us to have the opportunity to compare players on a higher level. You know, the college game is tough. ACC schools tend to be players that you have a better chance of watching consistently. The NCAA tournament, of course, gives you chances to see players, but there are a lot of sleepers as we look across just those smaller, like mid-conference teams. And then in terms of the international players, even less opportunity to see them play. So I think the pathway would at least allow us to have, and not even just us that like to make speculatory comments, but for front offices to have a chance to really see players' development and seeing them in that G League level to see what they can do at the next level. So I like it. I think it's a smart move, and it allows like a nice funnel into the NBA.
Speculation. My draft roses are science.
Sounds like that is going to be a whole show over at Locked On Hornets, and I can't wait to listen to that one because that'll be a lot of fun. I think that's as good of a spot to wrap up our Locked On Live post-lottery show. So thank you, everyone who tuned in. Thank you for the comments, interacting with us. This was a lot of fun. Doug, tell us what's coming on Locked On Hornets and where people can follow you on social media.
Yeah, you can follow me on social media at Doug Branson, LOH. You can follow the show on social media at Locked On Hornets. And we're obviously going to be talking about this huge news. The first time the Hornets have moved up in the draft since 1999 when they had the 3 pick and selected one of my favorite players of all time, Baron Davis. So we'll be talking all about that these next few weeks.
Renee, where can everyone find you and what's coming on Locked On Wizards?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm on Twitter at Renee P. Wash and on all social media at Renee P. Washington. And then Locked On Wizards at Locked On Wizards on Twitter. We are continuing to follow the team in the offseason, watching how they're progressing. And the biggest thing that we're watching is, of course, John Wall and Bradley Beal on their return to the court. So you can always check out the latest on what's going on with the Wizards.
And then, John, are the Celtics going to sweep the 76ers? And are you going to be talking about it, I'm assuming?
I'm going to be talking about a lot of playoff basketball on the Locked On Celtics podcast. I'm barely going to mention the fact that they got the 14th pick. And I'm going to be talking about potentially sweeping the Sixers. And you'll hear on the Locked On Celtics podcast, you'll hear from Brett Brown. You'll hear from Brad Stevens and their comments about the Sixers and the Celtics in Game 3. What would normally be a pivotal Game 3, but it's obviously a much different scenario in the bubble.
And I'm Jake Madison, host of the Locked On Pelicans podcast. You can find me on Twitter at NolaJake. We should probably just rename the podcast to Locked On Zion at this point. So follow our shows. Follow your favorite team. There's a Locked On podcast for that. Locked On whatever it might be, whether it is the NBA, which is why you're here, NFL, MLB. We've got a number of others as well. Your team every day. There's no other daily podcast coming to you about your favorite team like that, hitting all of the biggest points. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Big thank you to Doug, Renee, John. This was fun. We'll have to do these more often. And thank you all for watching.
Now, John, move your head so we can see the score.
Yeah.
There's a game on right now, so I wanted to get people to that.